Okay, let us pray. Dear God, as we're coming here to study the things that are happening in the world to a group of people that were always misunderstood, persecuted, condemned, treated as lepers. But we know when Jesus touched lepers to heal them, so should we touch the unwanted today and tell them it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. Come to God, give him your heart, and sit by his feet. As we study this, Lord, and we realize this is the work we have to do, that we don't treat them as lepers, that we must bring them to your feet. What a big job we have. And we don't even know if we are already now enough people to do this job. But we can only trust in you. As you provided 300 men, that was enough to conquer a city. That we, as this group, which is so small over the world, would be enough to conquer this statue, that we can hit it at his feet and grind it to dust. Help us to fully comprehend what you expect of us. Let we reason together, and that we lift you up and your love. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Happy Sabbath, everybody. You guys are not going to believe this. I'm again going to talk about transgender. As I'm now this week also watching and looking at everything, I began to realize something very interesting. And that is, they are the decided factor. They are splitting the groups. They are the news. They are the ones that is talked about the most. It's like they started to be the catalyst of everything that the far right dislikes. Now, even in radical feminism, it split the group in two. There's a group in radical feminism that is so transphobic, and they are called TERF. It's TERF. I'm going to discuss a little bit about them and why are they so transphobic? What is their reasoning? And you will realize it is so bad and it's so sad. Now, TERF is an acronym of Trans Inclusionary Radical Feminists. First recorded in 2008, the term was originally used to distinguish trans-exclusive feminists from a group of radical feminists who reject the assertion that trans women are women. The inclusion of trans women in women's space and transgender rights legislation. Trans-inclusive feminists assert that these ideas are transphobic. Use of the term TERF has since broadened to include reference to people with trans-exclusionary views who are not necessarily involved with radical feminism. Though it was created as a neutral descriptor, TERF is now typically considered derogatory. These called TERFs often reject the label and instead describe their beliefs as gender critical in academic discourse. Okay, let me tell you this. They use and play with words. They say no, they prefer gender critical. But if you look at what TERFs means, it means trans exclusionary radical feminist. It says what they believe. Why would they act like that? Why would they now suddenly reject it after they name themselves TERF? Critics over the word had pointed to its usage alongside insulting or abusive rhetoric and describe it as bullying tool, while other academics have argued that this alone does not make the term a slur. Now, the meaning of slur means it's you. I don't even want to say it, so I'm not. When you call it and says again means something bad. You use slur words. It's really abusive language towards groups that you don't like. So that's what a slur is. Just for explanations, those who don't understand the word. Now, why bullying tool? Why do they feel they are now being bullied by the word TERF after they named themselves TERF in the beginning? How did it come about? Why is the name TERF suddenly not fine to use anymore and it become a slur? Let me explain the history of TERF and its early beginnings, why they don't want to use TERF anymore, and why do they say it's a bullying tool. Let's go back. In May 24th, a few dozen people gathered in a conference room at the Central Library in a century-old Georgian Revival building in downtown Portland, Oregon, United States, for an event called Rad Firms Response, as that means name. Now we know Rad Firms means radical feminist. The conference had been convened by a group that wanted to defend two positions that have made radical feminism anathema to much of the left. First, the organizers hoped to refute charges that the desire to ban prostitution implies hostility towards prostitutes. Then they were going to try to explain why, at a time when transgender rights are rising in power and influence, radical feminists insist on regarding transgender, excuse me, my computer's just making a problem here, women as men. Why should not be allowed to use human, while, excuse me, my screens keep going down. Then they were going to try to explain why, at a time when transgender rights are rising in power, and keeps on giving me trouble. Sorry, guys. I'm going to move it. And influence, radical feminists insist on regarding the transgender women as men who should not be allowed to use women's facilities such as public restrooms or participate in events organized exclusively for women. The dispute begins more than 40 years ago at the height of the second wave feminist movement. In an early skirmish in 1973, the West Coast Lesbian Conference in Los Angeles furiously split over the scheduled performance by the folk singer Beth Elliott, who is what is then called a transsexual, and Robin Morgan, the keynote speaker, said, I will not call a male she. 32 years of suffering in this androgynic society. I did say this correct previously. I'm nervous. And it's surviving. Having earned me the title woman, one walked down the street by a male transvestite, 5 minutes of his being hassled, which he may enjoy. Can you see how bad it is? So this person says if he's been molested, he might enjoy it even. That's how transphobic they are. And then he dares to think he understood our pain. No, in our mother's names, in our own, we must not call him sister. Such views are shared by few feminists now, but they still have foothold among some self-described radical feminists who have found themselves in an acrimonious battle with trans people and their allies. Trans women say that they are women because they feel female. That at some put it, they have women's brain in men's bodies. Radical feminists reject the notion of a female brain. They believe that if women think and act differently from men, it's because society forces them to, require them to be sexually attractive, nurturing, differential. In the words of Larry Cave, a speaker of Radfem's response, femininity is a ritualized submission. She says also, in the view, gender is less an identity than a caste position. Anyone born a man retains male privileges in society, even if he chooses to live as a woman, and accept a correspondingly subordinate social position. The fact that he has a choice means that he can never understood what being a woman is really like. Can you see how these people do not understand what is really a transgender, and that it is not a choice, that their brains is women. They will always have been women, and they always will be women, even if the house they live in is not that of a woman. They don't see it. By extension, when trans women demands to be accepted as a woman, they are simply exercising another form of male entitlement. All this enraged trans women and their allies. That I can imagine. It would me too, who point to the discrimination that trans people endure. Although radical feminism is far, women have won far more formal equalities than trans people have. In most states, it's legal to fire someone for being transgender, and transgender people can't serve in the military. Now, this was written in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if it changed. It might have. A recent survey by the National Center for Transgender Equality and the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force found overwhelming levels of anti-trans violence and persecution. 41% of respondents said that they had attempted suicide. So does that sound to you that it was a choice? Having rejected this supposition, a radical feminists now find themselves in a position that few would have imagined when the conflict began, shunned as reactionaries on the wrong side of sexual rights issue. It is to them a baffling political inversion. Radfem's response was originally to have taken place across town from a library at a Quaker meeting house. Now, a Quaker, it was also a very conservative church. But trans activists had launched a petition on change.org demanding that the event be cancelled. They said that in hosting it, the Quakers would alienate trans people and be complicit in the violence against them. The Quakers sitting concerned in their community revoked the agreement. It wasn't the first time that such an event has lost a scheduled venue. The Radfems at 2012, which was our Sunday law, conference was to be held in London at Conway Hall, which bill itself, excuse me, het was not our Sunday law, it's been Elder Pom in the told us that 2014 will be our Sunday law. So I had to fix myself there. Bills itself as a hub for free speech and independent thought. But trans activists objected both to Radfem's women-only policy, which was widely understood to exclude trans women, and to the participants of Sheila Jeffries, a professor of political science at the University of Melbourne. Jeffrey was scheduled to speak on prostitution, but she is a long-time critic of the transgender movement. And Cornwall Hall officials decided that they could not allow a speaker who conflicts with their ethos, principles, and culture. Ultimately, the event was held at a still secret location. Organizers escorted delegates to it from a nearby meeting place. Radfem 2013 also had to switch locations, as did a gathering in Toronto last year called Radfem's Rise Up. In response, 37 radical feminists, including major figures from the second wave such as G.I. Grace Atkinson, Kathy Sackchild, and Michelle Wallace, signed a statement titled Forbidden Discourse. The silencing of feminist criticism of gender, which described their alarm at threats and attack, some of them physically, and individuals and organizations daring to challenge the current fashionable concept of gender, they say. That's what they say. Which, at all this in mind, the Radfem's response organizers had arranged the library space as a backup, but then a post on Portland Indie Media announced, "We questioned the library's administration about allowing a hate group who promotes discrimination, and the response is that they cannot kick them out because of freedom of speech. So we also exercise our right to freedom of speech in public and space this Saturday to drive the TERFs and Radfems out of the library and our Portland." When then I conclude, is that they, because of their hate speech, they themselves were prosecuted. So now you understand why they don't want to call TERFs anymore. It's because that it's just been associated with them that they, which is true, they did speak against trans people. And at that moment, they used the name. Nobody wants to accommodate them anymore. They did not understand that freedom of speech is only freedom to the point. And as we have learned in this movement, that freedom have its limits, and they have reached theirs. That's why they changed their name and don't want to use it anymore. Now, does all feminists believe that? No, of course not. There's another view. Feminist views on transgender topics vary wildly. The third wave feminists and fourth wave feminists tend to view the struggle for trans rights as an integral part of intersectional feminism. Former president of the American National Organization for Women, and it's shortened as NOW, N-O-W, Terry O'Neill, has stated that the struggle against transphobia is a feminist issue, with NOW affirming that trans women are women, trans girls are girls. Several studies have found that people who identify as feminists tends to be more accepting of trans people than that of those who don't. Some authors, such as Julia Serrano and Emily Koyama, I might spell it, say it totally wrong, so sorry, as Koyama, or I don't know, have founded a stream within feminism called transfeminism. Can everybody just mute their mics, please? Which views the struggle for the rights of trans people and trans women in particular as an integral part of feminist struggle for all women's rights. So it's interesting that this article says they founded a stream within feminists called transfeminism. So can you see that they even recognize that there is more than one stream? We'll come to that. As you can see, even the radical feminist movement has the two streams of information. The one believes in true science and the other one holds on to cultural norms. We have to be careful about what stream of information we follow. The wrong one always leads to persecution or control of a group. If you're unsure of what you're reading, just look at the end of it. If it means it is controlling or persecuting a group, or not understanding a group or hurting a group, then relook your article or what you look at. So the wrong one always leads to persecution, correct? So it might look like the right group, because we are told that we have to be radical feminists, and they say they are radical feminists. They call themselves that, but are they truly? Here in today's society, it is radical to believe that that you have the right to have a job. Is it? No, it's not radical anymore. Everybody is just accepting women work. And that you have the right to your own bodies. It's not so radical anymore. What is truly radical is what now believes. For they are radical in the concept to say that trans issues are radical feminist problem. They are radical in accepting that a trans woman is a woman. They are not blinded by cultural norm to see that a trans woman has lost her privilege and are being seen as someone we are rejected by society. They are treated just as women have been treated for so long, that listen to the science and believe the science of it. Excuse me. So if you look at the other group, they got stuck in the past. They still believe all the other things, and they think that it makes them radical. They didn't go with the time. And when new light came to them, they rejected that light. And where now, or those who believe the same as now, they took that light and went forward with that. But you must also remember that this world does not have a perfect system. Even as it's radical feminist, that like now, it still is not a perfect system. Only God does, and He is teaching us what a perfect system should look like. So even if we are following the liberal side and say that they are the right stream of information, you have to consider that they have errors and only can be corrected by the help of God. They don't have a perfect view. And that is where we come into play. Our work is to give them the things that they are lacking so that they have the perfect view that we should have. So this is now formally ended the transgender study I did. Is there any questions or queries or fears about transgender? Please, you can talk to me now or ask questions. Everybody seemed quiet, so nobody have questions. I'm going through the list of LGBTQ. And the next is Q. Most say it's queer. There is something that will add to that, but we'll get to that later on. But I'm going to touch first on queer. What is queer? If you heard a lot of times say, oh, I'm queer, or this is a queer thing. Now, queer is an umbrella term for people who are not heterosexual or cisgender originally meaning. And the original meaning means strange or peculiar. Queer comes to be used pejoratively against those with same-sex desires and or relationship in the late 19th century. So queer's original meaning means strange or peculiar. And people that find it strange and peculiar that people can have same-sex relationships. And that's why they have been called queer. For us today, queer means that you are part of the LGBTQ. Having a relation to a gender identity or a sexuality that does not fit society. Traditional ideas about gender or sexuality uses the word queer to include anyone who wants to be included. And that's the beauty of queer. That's the beauty of the LGBTQ. There is no right way to see your gender or your sexuality. They give you open space to really delve into it and see who you are. They don't tell you how you should feel, how you should, and how you should see yourself. You have to find it in yourself to find that. The word queer has history to it that it's hurtful. Queer used to be, and sometimes still is, used to put down or disrespect the LGBTQ people. But more and more people use the word with pride to identify themselves. So some people agree with it and say, okay, let's use it. Some say, nope. So please don't call anybody queer unless you know they're cool with it. The best thing to do is to ask before you give people labels. By using the name that was used to be a slur and negative, is to take back their power. And that's how a lot of LGBTQ people feel, is that having that power back by taking a thing that's so bad and make it their own and be proud of it. The queer term is mostly used as an umbrella term for LGBTQ plus community. It is not a specific label, but it's fluid, and only label on it is that you are not part of the heterosexual community. Queer can be used as a way to identify that falls outside the heteronormative and can sometimes hold political meaning. It can also be used as a verb, to queer something, which means to either read something through a queer lens or to create or change something in a way that falls outside the heteronormative way of operating or functioning. For instance, let's take a picture. Somebody draw a picture of a woman standing there, smiling. Now, a queer person comes and says, I'm gonna queer it. And they take and they, in the back of that person, of that picture of that woman, they will draw a rainbow, LGBTQ rainbow. Then they queer it, if you understand what I'm trying to say. That is a stupid way, but an easier way to explain it. Then the other, they say also it means questioning, the Q. So it can be queer or questioning. And it's really the same thing if you really want to take it like that. Because queer, you don't put a label on yourself. Questioning, it means, okay, let me read it to you. The questioning of one's sexual orientation, sexual identity, gender, or all three is a process of exploration by people who may be unsure, still exploring, or concerned about applying a social label to themselves for various reasons. The letter Q is sometimes added to the end of the acronym LGBT. The Q can refer to either queer or questioning. So you can see it's also very fitting. Questioning, queer, it's really the same thing. Sexual orientation, sexual identity, or gender does not always coincide with each other. Meaning, for example, if an individual identifies themselves as a heterosexual, they may not only be attracted to someone of the opposite sex and have sexual interactions with someone who is of the same sex without necessarily identifying themselves as bisexual. I know that sounds strange. Let me read it for you again because I really want you to get this. If an individual identifies themselves as heterosexual, they may not only be attracted to someone of the opposite sex and have sexual interaction with someone who is of the same sex without necessarily identifying themselves as bisexual. The understanding that one does not need to apply any type of gender or sexuality label to oneself is relative publicly and socially prominent in the modern day, along with gender and sexual fluidity, which is also more openly discussed and accepted in today's society. So it means that don't put labels on people that doesn't want labels. And that is what the queer stands for. It is a label without a label, if I can see it like this. Now, we see that there come in extra letters in the LGBTQ, and that is A and A, E or O in Afrikaans. Now, A or I, now the plus and then plus. So what does that mean? What does that plus mean? The plus after the Q can have some meaning, but what it identifies is shows inclusively to all sexualities. So what does that mean? It means that you are not just fixed on these labels LGBTQ. The plus is for everyone, is inclusive to say there is more. And why a plus? Why didn't they make it something else or put all the others that they know about in there? Why plus? Because it means that there can be more, and they leave space open to add more. It means it's progressive, it's fluid. Also, it shows fluidity of sexuality and how broad it can be. They also have added two before the plus, and that, as I told you, is I, like I am, which is intersex, and the A, which can have two meanings, and which I'll discuss below. I already discussed with you intersex is when a person is born with some or all, both genders, female and male genders, or a part of each. Okay, let's discuss the A. Asexual. The adjective describes a person who does not experience sexual attraction, sometimes shortened to ace. It's an umbrella term that can also include people who are demisexual, meaning they do experience some sexual attraction. Then you get gray sexual, meaning those who may not fit the strict definition of the word asexual, or romantic, meaning they are experiencing little or no romantic attraction, and or has little to no desire to form romantic relationships. And you have to say asexual people, even if they're not interested in the bedroom situation, they might, a lot of them married, some of them, they do have romantic feelings. So there's a lot of nuances that you have to understand. And that's why asexual is just umbrella term for a much deeper understanding. Those who are in the movement and are not part of the LGBTQ also have a name in the queer community. Did you know that? The A can mean something else. It can mean ally. Those who are not part of the LGBTQ community, we call them allies. Also, the affectionate term given to a friend of the LGBTQ community is called straight allies. For example, straight identifying people who support LGBTQ plus rights and queer culture. Allies are important because of the influence they can have over other straight people who may not have such a deep understanding of the issues affecting the queer community. In this way, allies can be bridged between communities. So we, or say this movement, is an ally of the LGBTQ. And that's why, so the A is asexual or allies. And we really have to study more. I believe I just touch on the main principles of the LGBTQ. And I believe there's other people that can go into in-depth studies much more than I can. But for me, except when somebody wants to, if there's question answering session they want, we can give a question answering session. If not, then this will be the end of the LGBTQ studies. So anybody have any comments or anything, please feel free to speak to me now. Please, you're welcome.
Hey, Erika.
Hello.
How are you?
Well, and you?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the study. And if we want to go in depth into these studies, like what you just shared in the last minute, I don't know it. It's the first time I hear about it. And how can I get to those sources? Is there a way for you to direct us to the sources that may be relevant for going in depth? If you have touched into the heart of the LGBTQ community.
Okay. The only one thing I can tell you.
If is it possible that you can go?
You're breaking away, I can't hear you.
Oh no, I was gonna ask if you say this is your last study, how are we going to get to the depth of the LGBTQ, as you say? Is it possible to continue?
But you're naughty. I don't know. You know what? I mean, so as far as I possibly think I could, maybe if I can have a break and see what I can find more, I can come back to you. But for now, I'm sort of out of it. If anybody have, that's why questions, do help me to go further and study further and say, oh, okay, wait, I don't know this, I must go further and look into it. So if you guys want more studies, you guys must do your part and give me questions. Then it will maybe open a door for me to something I didn't see or didn't understand it. But for me, that is where my mind is, as my mind is full. I gave you everything I had. Somebody else can build on it and have much more information than I do. but my cup is now empty.
Okay, thank you, Erika. No, thank you for emptying your cup on us.
It was a pleasure. But really, you guys, if you guys want some more, please ask me questions, throw me with questions, and I will be gladly give you another session here. But for now, I'm done. If you something, even if it's not question, if you're unsure about something, or if you have trouble understanding a certain concept, or even if you don't get it, ask. If you ask, you will get, you will receive. If you don't ask, you will never receive. So please ask.
Hello, Erika.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the studies. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend every single one of the studies of the lessons that you've given, but so I'm not sure if my question was addressed, but someone was asking, how do we address the question, the LGBTQ community not being present in Eden? Like, why didn't God ordain from that point that this was legitimate? How should I answer someone who asked me that question?
Okay. I think that God has given us just an example of how the first people were interacting. That was just an example. I don't think it was God's total vision for this earth. Remember, we are only know now partly. The Bible is just written for a certain purpose. And the purpose was to let us understand some concepts. So even, I can't remember who said that. There was much more that Jesus did on earth. But if it should have been written in books, the books will fill the earth. So the Bible was just there to get the main concepts. And the main concepts of Adam and Eve is God had made a helpmate for Adam, and they become one. And it didn't expand on it because it was not necessary at that time for salvation. I don't know, does it help you, Doreen?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Erika.
Melanie?
There's one thing, Doreen, that I also would like to know. I'm just going to put it out there. I don't think we've got an answer for this. Is when we understand that God made the human beings, it was a counterpart of himself. It's a relationship that I don't know. And I know Elder Palmander also said he would like to understand the full concept of what it means to be a counterpart of God. But when we look at Adam at creation, and you do not look at gender, you can also see that Eve was made in somehow a counterpart to fulfill certain things there, and you can look at the whole relationship. So in one sense, if you do a study, you can only look at relationships and understand more on relationships. But what we do is, because of the way that we've been, I think, grown up and been taught, the minute we look at Adam and Eve, we automatically bring in the gender aspect, and we don't want to look at it without gender. We don't want to just look at the relation part. We also always want to bring in the gender part. And I think when you go a little bit further and you study what God wants us to be a counterpart, you can never bring in gender there. So I think when you only look at relationships, there's a lot we can learn, but we confuse ourselves when we bring in gender, because I don't think we look at relationships the correct way. We confuse ourselves when we bring in gender, and especially when you look at the LGBTQ, our whole concept that we used to have about relationships is now challenged, because now we have to look at relationships without gender, and I think that becomes a bigger issue, because I think it's also a preparation for us going into heaven, where we will go into an environment where we will not be gendered. And God is not a gender. And I think it's challenging our views to start going in that direction and start learning as well. And I think we still struggle with that.
Thank you for that. Makes sense.
Erika?
It's just while Erika is coming back, it's just interesting to note the response that you've just shared. I think it's really a good way to look at this, is that we cannot limit the connection between Adam and Eve with just gender issues. And I think that's what even heterosexual relationships do. They are limited in terms of just viewing the relationship between a man and a woman as just about gender. Therefore, when you look at it like that, you are forced to assign roles based on the anatomy, which is very, very limited. It's a myopic look at something that is supposed to reflect the very image of God, which means then that is far broader than just gender. I love the idea of it's about a relationship, and a relationship between any two people cannot be defined by physical differences. And I like the idea that as God is preparing us for equality, therefore even the gender issue for non-genderness, that it's starting now, so that we begin to embrace the fact that gender does not define a person, how they identify themselves and how they connect with other people. And it's just all part of our message of equality, that we are all equal. And it's not right to begin to have perceptions about someone simply because of the physicals of it. We know when it comes to race, we understand it very well. It's just when it comes to gender, we slow to understand it. But as a Black person, I know what it feels like to be judged because of my color, for certain attributes to be ascribed to me because of my color. You know, like people will say Black people are lazy. I don't want to be described as someone that's lazy. I know how hard I work just because I'm a Black person. And we know that kind of generalization is not politically correct. It's not acceptable. But when it comes to gender, we kind of become, we close our minds and we don't want to apply the same principle we can clearly see concerning race. So if God has done away with race, and he's doing away with gender, it is because he's preparing us for heaven, where there is no gender. Angels don't have a gender. God himself does not have a gender. And yet we were trying to enter heaven with these gender ascribed roles that mean nothing. They only served a certain purpose. Thank you so much for helping me understand that more.
Yes, you put it very well. Thank you, Doreen. Okay. Anybody
Erika?
else? Yes.
So if I understand well what you're saying, Gobas and Doreen, to put it in my own words, is that while we are still here on earth, we need to put away the mindset that differentiates us based on gender, meaning we must have a new mind that does not genderize, if that's the right terminology to use, genderizing. We need
that we lost him.
Yes, he's kicked out.
Yeah, I was kicked out too just now. All right. Anybody else have a comment till he comes back?
No, I'm done. I'm done, Erika.
Okay. Anybody else wants to make a comment or a question?
Hi, Erika. It's Lucky.
Hi, Lucky.
Okay, I want to ask a question. I know you've discussed this question before, but I want you to clarify it again.
Okay.
When you were talking about those people who are fluid,
Yes.
and yeah, you were talking about the gender can change over time. Now
Yes.
I'm asking, let's say someone in a movement, you've married already, and over time the gender changes. What do you do? Because you're married already now.
That's a very hard question. I don't know if it means that that person's gender is changing so much that he's not attracted to his partner or her partner at all, then it's really problematic and they should have a discussion and go see the elders or talk to the elders. Personally, I don't know what would be the effect of it because they are still married. And God had prescribed rules for when can a marriage be broken up. If it is if the gender is fluid, but it's still attracted to that partner or love that partner still, as long as there's open communication between the partnership, and their partner is willing to accept that person, for it really doesn't change that much their relationship, then I can see no problem why the marriage cannot continue, even if there is fluidity happened in that relationship. It's not problematic then. The only problem is that, for instance, if it's like a gay or a lesbian situation and there's no in between, yes, then it can be problematic. And my best recommendation is to see the elders. I don't know what even would be the next step. I really don't know. But it will be a conundrum, even for them, I believe.
Yeah, all right. No, thank you.
Okay. Maybe I can just say this whilst if there's no more questions. If it comes in a situation where in a marriage, one of the partners come out to the other partner, if that partner is willing to accept them for who they are, they might not act on their feelings towards, say for instance, if it is a relationship where the person is married to a woman, a man is married to a woman, and he comes out to his wife and tells her, listen, for years I knew I had feelings for men, but I never acted on it. But I have feelings for women too, and I believe I'm bisexual or pansexual, then there must be a serious discussion between them and say, okay, do you still attracted to me as your wife? No, you still says, no, nothing has changed. I'm just so long. Then you can open up to your partner. Please be very careful about opening up, because know that your partner might be immediately on the defensive, immediately be scared, immediately be frightened of losing, and things that might change. That might be an issue. But if there's really good communication and you are friends, and not all partners are friends, let me just clear that out. But if you are friends, then yes, and there will be no problems in the marriage, I believe. Anybody else? Okay, then just let's end with prayer. Dear God, thank you that we can touch on such subjects, that we can be vulnerable to each other and talk about these things openly. Help us to help one another to fully comprehend the situation. And where there's a need, my Lord, then please show us where the need is, that we can address it. If there's more to say, your people are ready to help those who do not understand and who is in need to hear more. Touch our hearts, open our hearts, that we can pull in people that is different from us. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.